what if youth ministries focused intently on student transitions?
What if student ministries gave ownership to students?
What if every youth pastor believed that a student's freshman year of college was still their responsibility?
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Rethinking Youth Ministry Podcast. I'm Leslie, and I am super excited for our conversation today. We are going to be talking about rethinking youth ministry models. What does that even mean? We'll get into it in a second. But first, I want you to meet the people who are here with me in this conversation. We're going to start all the way over to my right. You can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Awesome. Hey, I'm Katlyn. I'm a student pastor here at a church in Cumming, Georgia. Been in student ministry about 9 years and absolutely love everything to do with it.
I love that so much. Katlyn, thanks for being here in this conversation. Up next.
Hey, I'm Shane. I'm a part of the Orange Students team, and I've been in youth ministry for a little bit over 15 years in both like volunteer and vocational roles. And I'm excited for this conversation because I'm looking forward to learning from you all.
Oh, man, that's going to be great. And then also joining us, we have our friend over in Portland. You can introduce yourself.
Hey, aloha everyone. My name is Jarin Oda. I am a youth pastor at a church called Bridgetown in Portland, Oregon. Friend to Shane, and really excited to just get to know everyone here and have this conversation together.
Yes, this is fantastic.
Thanks for the shout out. I appreciate it.
We love it. We love it. I think one of the things that's going to make this conversation interesting is that I think we all kind of come from a little bit of different experiences, even from where we grew up in youth ministry and youth group context. And so I want to start the conversation there. Tell me whether or not you grew up in youth ministry. And if you did, I want to know what the model of youth ministry was like. Like, what were the rhythms? What were the gatherings like? What were the events? What were the weird things and traditions? I want to hear about that. And then if you didn't grow up in church, I want to know what you thought was really weird about church and youth group kids. Like, I just want to know what you thought was weird from your seat. So I feel like I want to start with Shane. Tell us your whole, tell us your story.
Yeah, so I entered youth ministry like right after the turn of the millennium.
Okay.
So for any of us that are millennials, like that was a really interesting time in youth ministry. So my first youth group was called Crossfire.
Let's go.
Because of course it was, you know. I had a youth pastor who also played the guitar, and he had a collection of zany hats. So like that was just kind of like the vibe. It was pretty low key, but I think early 2000s, like it was what everybody was trying to be is trendy. You know, we listened to a lot of Switchfoot, some Delirious, you know, in there.
So
we sang of His Love Forever. We definitely did that too.
Wait, so how often did y'all meet? Like, did y'all have a weekly or?
So we met on Wednesdays, but so the model changed while I was in school though. So I went from Crossfire to Devo in my high school years. That was the name of the ministry. It was sick. And I want to say for Devo, we met Sunday nights. It was either Wednesday or Sunday nights, but I grew up in Wednesday night, Sunday morning, and Sunday night church.
Wednesday night, Sunday morning, and then Sunday night
church.
Gotcha.
Not all of those were youth group, but like that was the model that I was used to.
And did y'all have any like big event that was like the youth event for the year or anything like that?
Yeah, we had two. So I grew up in a denomination. So we had a summer camp at the Assemblies of God campground.
Gotcha.
In Prescott, Arizona. Okay. Shout out Granite Hills. And then we did a youth convention, which was also an annual denominational convention thing. Cool. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it was cool.
All right. Katlyn, what about you?
Yeah, I didn't grow up in student ministry at all. I lived in Portland, and my family attended a super, super small church. So the first time they ever tried to get me plugged in with students, it was like elementary up through 12th grade. And I was just like painfully an introvert. And so I walked into that room and I said, absolutely not. And sat with my parents in church.
Okay, wait, you're saying elementary age all the way to 12th grade in one room.
Yeah.
About how many people would you say were in that one room?
Not more than like 15.
Yeah.
But I was like, this is not for me. And I have zero interest in it. So.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I hear that. Jarin, I am curious about whether or not you grew up in ministry or not. And then what was that experience for you?
Yeah, so as of my sophomore year of high school, we attended a church that was a Foursquare church, and we would meet on Sunday mornings outside of the main service where it was just middle school and high school put together. And I have most of my fond memories of youth ministry came from small group discipleship.
Yeah.
And in that space of small group discipleship, like it just left a lot of room for some deep, I would say, spiritual conversations to take root. So that's where my fond memories come from in youth group. Not so much the model of it, but like what the model created room for.
That's good.
And looking back on it, I'm really grateful.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Let's say I forgot something.
Yeah.
Sunday school.
Sunday
I had Sunday
school.
school. So I played a lot of baseball growing up, especially in my middle school and high school years. So I missed church a lot, but I do remember that being a thing when I was there on Sunday mornings.
Yeah.
Sunday school was a thing.
We had Sunday school too. Like the youth ministry I grew up in, small church. We were probably that weird room of like elementary through high school. She was like, "Come hang out, Katlyn," and like scared her away. No, we were like a tiny church. So, and I think because it was such a family church, you just knew all the people and their siblings, and it felt weird to be with like one kid but not their sibling, not be there. I don't know. I think there's something about like family churches that you just do everything together. And so, but we did have at one point, I remember we were trying to get fancy and we broke out and we're kind of like, we're going to do a middle school, a Sunday school, a high school Sunday school, a younger kid Sunday school. It was kind of fun. It was really fun. But yeah, so Sunday school was a part of our model, of my model growing up. Thursday night Bible study. They still do Thursday night Bible study. And I think that was really innovative for its time, because it was like, if you want to do something else and visit other ministries on Wednesday, because lots of ministries meet on Wednesday, you could do that, right? It's like, okay, I can see that.
Yeah.
So Thursday night Bible study, but I think a lot of times all the kids and adults were together on Thursday nights, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Okay.
And then there weren't any like conferences, retreats, camps, any of that kind of stuff. I'm trying to think what else was in our model. Oh, the kids, we were in charge of selling chips and donuts after church. So for 50 cents, you can get a bag of chips or one donut.
That's
and
amazing.
That's how we fundraise. And like, it was like,
good.
this is what the youth do. We sell the chips and the donuts. So that was a part of our
that's really
context.
funny.
Anyway, yeah.
That's funny. That's cool.
So, okay. So really, we're talking about youth ministry models because a lot of things have changed over the years in culture, in church attendance, and how families are structured. So many things have changed. I don't know if youth ministry models have changed a lot or not. So maybe the first place we'll start with really diving into this conversation is, I'm curious, let's just spout out a couple of typical, like, what is the average? I don't know if average is the right word, but what are some typical models for youth ministry? Like, when do they gather? How long do they gather? What do they do when they're there? What are some of the paces of their year? So throwing that out there for whoever wants to jump in.
I mean, I'd say like the typical that like I've seen is you've got your like Sunday programming, whether it's in the morning or the evening, and maybe like a Wednesday night Bible study. And then somewhere along the way, there's a summer camp and maybe a spring or a fall camp. But that seems to be like a normal rhythm that you see across the board at a lot of different churches.
Yeah.
So I haven't been a local church youth pastor in a couple years now, but while I was in it, and now like as I'm speaking in different places around the country and talking to youth pastors in different contexts, I think the great debate is still like Wednesday or Sunday.
Ooh.
Like I'm still hearing that, like, should we meet on Wednesday or Sunday? Not as much like around, let's kind of blow up this model and put it back together and see what happens. But it's still that age old. It's either Sunday or Wednesday, Sunday morning, Sunday night, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm curious why we think Sunday or Wednesday is like, what are some of the reasons people are trying to wrestle between those 2 days? I'm going to pitch it to you, Jarin, to maybe speak into that. Why does the conversation of should we meet on Sunday or Wednesday, like, why is that the conversation?
Oh boy. This is a question that I am currently even holding with my church and families here. So this is very pertinent. I would just say students, at least in my tenure, my short tenure of youth ministry, have more extracurriculars than me when I was that age. I think there's like a resume anxiety, like seriously, a resume, and for good reasons, understandably, but just midweeks, the amount of time spent, plus on Sundays, when we're talking about wanting youth to have their own space, but also wanting them to be interconnected to the church. Sundays are that time or gold mine for youth pastors to have that interconnectedness, right? Where they're worshiping together with their families, where they're intaking everything at the same time as a whole church community. And do you really want to kind of pull them from that for a time for their own thing then? So I think that's the tension of, do we give them more autonomy, which they're developmentally speaking, they need more autonomy. It's a good thing. And how do we keep them interconnected with the body of Christ in their context? I think that's always a tug of war from my perspective.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I'm curious if y'all have any responses to that.
It's so real. Like hearing you say that, like that was one of the biggest tension points as a youth ministry leader. Like it was incredibly difficult to please every parent, but you had to keep family schedules in mind because we were supporting parents and we were supporting families. So it's just so difficult now and increasingly difficult as students pick up more and more activities.
Yeah. I mean, we've been wrestling with that at my church too, of like, is Sunday night the best night to meet? Or like, do we do a midweek thing? Like there's no way to win with everybody's schedule. And that just makes it so much more difficult now to catch students.
Yeah.
I actually led through a Wednesday night to Sunday transition. I'm a church in Arizona. And well, first of all, it took like probably 3 years until we could actually make the move. So by the time from when I pitched it to when we could actually execute the move, it took that long. Because
of stakeholders in the decision making, or because of getting the message? Like, what were some of the factors?
I mean, it was kind of a both and. Our church was in a really transitional time. I've talked about that actually on a different episode of RYM. I don't know if we can link to that in the show notes, Corinne, but we'll see. I love show notes. Anyways,
I know you
okay. But we were in a really transitional time, and so we had to be really mindful of the stakeholders, not just decision makers, but also the parents and how the parents were involved. And as soon as there's this book, I actually haven't read it, so I don't know if I should even say it, but it's called "Don't Move My Cheese." It's just a change management book. Who moved my cheese? It's a change management strategy, but as soon as you move that cheese from Wednesday to Sunday, even if it made more sense for the community that you're in, for the insiders in the church, it is going to raise a lot of tension and potentially frustrate a lot of people. So we just had to communicate through it. It wound up being great. They're still doing it today. In fact, they've actually been able to take it a step further down the road from what I was able to do there as far as programming schedule goes. But it's not easy to lead through that stuff.
That's true. I think we've kind of mentioned it here on this conversation, but people have a lot in their schedules already. Like kids and teenagers have even more than they've maybe ever had potentially. But I think even back in the day, like driving to church, like it was just an extra thing on the schedule or another thing to account for on the schedule. I'm curious with the way I think culture has shifted maybe since, post-pandemic even. I think with millennials becoming the parents who are bringing kids and teenagers to church, or maybe more so kids to church, there's like all these shifts happening in culture. I would love for this conversation to be one of the first places where people are thinking outside of the box. What are some things we maybe could pivot to or consider when we're thinking about what else can go in this youth ministry model? Because I think right now we're saying the model is more so show up to something at least once a week for probably, would you say, like an hour and a half to 2 hour block, right? So that's the model essentially. The core is showing up once a week to a space. What are some other features of this model that could exist, even if we don't move that? Let's for now not, kick the hornet's nest, but let's say that stays. But what else? What are some other ways we can start thinking about youth ministry models?
That's really good.
One of the things that we've been playing with at my church is trying to implement something that more meets students where they're at. So we've started trying to launch some midweek Bible studies, and they're not like a Wednesday night thing. It's more of what works for the students who are ready for that Bible study. So like we've got some that meet like Friday morning at 7 a.m. We've got a Monday at 7:45. We've got Wednesday at 7:30. Like, and meeting students at a coffee shop that's close to their school, and them and their friends come, or we've got a group that meets at Waffle House, and then the leader drives them to school. So like meeting them more where they're at and giving them opportunities to dive deeper without making an additional ask of, hey, come to the church. Add one more thing to your plate.
Okay, that's fascinating. I feel like I can camp out here forever, but I think you have to be an incredible leader to get people to buy into another thing on their schedules and to get people, to help steward that culture. What are some of the ways you got that to work?
The first thing we did was me and the other person on the student staff started leading our own, because we knew that leaders wouldn't buy in and follow us if we weren't also getting up and doing that. So we did that, and then we just got some phenomenal leaders who like lead on a Sunday night for us for high school anyway, but love their group so much that they're leading a Friday morning study for any of the girls in their group who want to come. So it's just been casting the vision of, hey, I know this is one more thing, and I know I'm asking you to get up an hour and a half early on a day, but this is what could come from this. So
That's amazing.
just pitching it in that kind of way.
That's
so good.
amazing.
That's awesome.
What are some other ways we can think outside of the box or, play with the model a little bit?
Yeah, so for me, really quick, Katlyn, I think that's so amazing and inspiring for someone in my context, because I so deeply believe in that one-to-one discipleship or one-to-two discipleship. The ratios are obvious too, where it's like I think five spiritually mature adults to one teen or something like that, right? Where there's like a more probability of a vibrant faith in the future. So I think that's right on the money. I can just share where Bridgetown Youth is currently at, and we're more open and I'm vulnerable in a good way than ever before. I got these action statements based off of a secular marketplace leader, so this may be wrong, but Simon Sinek had said, anytime you have a DNA or an identity that you want to shape, always use verbs for some reason. So I'm going to use a lot of verbs, and hopefully you guys can carry along in this. But for Bridgetown Youth, what we've been doing is pray and read daily, gather and worship weekly, serve and pray monthly, retreat annually, and then experiment regularly. So that's kind of our 5 rhythms.
I love that. That's cool.
That's amazing.
And you'll hear conventional youth ministry model in that, but then you'll also hear what I think, what I picked up from Andrew Root is any kind of healthy model has a space where it can be regularly changed or adjusted based on the needs and even desires of the people that exist within it. So that's where the experiment regularly comes from. I don't know if I need to explain in depth if you guys want me to, but that's currently what we're trying to work with.
Yeah.
So when you ask, what does it mean to be a part of Bridgetown Youth? You have a set of rhythms that comes with, the belonging, I would say, to our context.
Gosh, you know what I love about that is that actually sounds more like a model than what we often talk about.
Because we talk about programming as if it's a model, but it is not. But
what you just described, Jarin, is a model. Like you set these rhythms and then the programs flex within it.
Yep.
And what's so interesting about that is I feel like most often because anytime you're changing a model, you're leading through obviously change, and that's never easy, is this resistance to canceling this thing or moving this thing or doing this thing differently. But if you frame it in the type of way that Jarin just did, and you're still functioning within that model, you can do all sorts of stuff in that.
Right.
So that's what I love. I'm like, that is such a good way to think about what a youth ministry model actually is or can be.
Yeah. I know there's been lots of, and I want to go back to the experiment regularly or experiment that one. I want to go back to that one in a second, Jarin. Okay, so hold on to that. Be thinking about that. I think there's been more and more conversations about not just thinking about what's happening within your square footage, but what's happening across your footprint of your ministry. Yeah. That being, when you think about the footprint, like your carbon footprint or whatever footprints you think about, you really think about all the spaces, all the touch points, all the ways that you can engage. And I think the more we start thinking about our footprint, whether that's within our community or whether that's within a kid or student's life, I think we really start leaning toward what are the models that can help me structure this so that I'm not just doing something and calling it, programming or whatever. So I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
Okay, Jarin, hold that thought.
Yeah.
We'll come back to it though, because I want to know what it is. Jarin, I'm so curious about the experimenting because I feel very passionate about experimenting. I feel very passionate that people can say like, hey, we're only going to commit to this for X amount of time before we assess whether or not it works to keep doing. And I think that frees us up to have more fun, take more risk, do things that we otherwise wouldn't do if we knew we were making a permanent decision. But I want to hear more about how that landed in your model. Like tell us some more about the experimenting part.
Yeah. So really quick, I think I got this from Kara Powell and Brad Griffin, I think his name is. And they talked about how predictability is essential for a teenager. So having a model that is predictable can give a student the best chance of feeling safe, or at least giving them a sense of home base, in particular where they have multiple streams of their identity, throughout the week being taken up, and then they find a Wednesday night or a Sunday morning as a home base, right? Where there's not a ton of change. There's not something that's going to surprise them in a negative way. They kind of know what to expect. Now that can be a negative thing and that could be a positive thing. But the main thing is there's some level of predictability. So what I thought was, okay, let's keep something that's predictable and clear, but we have to leave room for something to be different or regularly experimented with, primarily because we're dealing with diverse personalities, and we're dealing with a God who's meeting these students in really special and unique ways that myself and even my leaders may not fully know about, but are wanting to join into. So experiment regularly. This is how it looks programmatically. I'm looking for, and I pitch this to my students and even some of my parents, I'm looking for early adapters. Have you ever heard of the innovation? I'm using all these marketplace terms. I'm so sorry. I promise I'm Christian.
Christians should be in the marketplace.
Yeah, 100%.
No, totally. No, sorry. Oh my gosh, that's so bad of me to say. All right. Well, the innovation curve has really early adapters, right? And then they have the middle change people, and then they have generally those who are non-adapters or late adapters in any kind of change and any kind of innovation. And so what I pitch to my students is, this is what it means to be an early adapter or someone who's like wanting to see change in your community. You trust the community and its leaders, and you're uncomfortable. You're uncomfortable enough because you know there's more, but you trust the leaders that they have your best interest in mind. And that combination, I think, is what the Spirit of God can really do something fresh in a community. But we need to get those groups of people together. So it's not like only the all-stars of a youth ministry get together and plan something. This is like, I am committed to this group of people in this time, in this place.
That's brilliant.
How can we get those people who want everyone to come with us in the same room and start to talk about, why are you uncomfortable? Why are we experiencing this sense of bother, for good reasons, for what's ahead?
Yeah.
So we created a student council model that came out of that. Like, for all of you early adapters, for any of you that believe in this, trust in this, but want more or see more, let's get you in the same room every third Sunday of the month, and let's talk about what we can do to, quote unquote, experiment regularly. You know our rhythms, you're committed to it, you're committed to the way of Jesus here at Bridgetown Youth, and how can we make these rhythms more relevant or potentially add something different? How can we just really walk alongside everybody? And the best answers or best responses usually come from the students themselves, right? So that's something and again, this is a very fresh model, folks. So ask me in 6 months and I could be like burnt out and going, oh, everything's burning. So
no, it's going to be great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a key thing in what Jarin shared with us was not just I think you call them like the superstar, rock star kids being the ones who get to make all the decisions and be included in all the conversations, but the ones who are bought in and curious, and they know how to even engage with that opportunity. I think that is brilliant.
Yeah, that's so good.
I feel like you had a question a second ago, Shane.
Well, yeah, I mean, it kind of goes a little bit with what Jarin was just saying. So it's interesting. I'm thinking this is one of the things that I've been thinking over the last few years, and I've said this to you before, Leslie. I think smaller churches are at a significant advantage right now to do this type of experimenting. But I say that as a beautiful opportunity that I can't come out of larger context. The last context that I was in is one of the largest churches in the world, I think. And doing what we're talking about is so difficult when you're that size.
Yeah.
Because there are so many, protocols to follow, so many conversations to have, so many stakeholders that are involved in it, that, even just the structure organizationally of how things work can make it really difficult. I still think it is a worthy pursuit. The way that we went about trying to implement some of the types of changes that we're talking about is very similar to what you were saying, Jarin. We had focus groups. Like, we had focus groups with students. That was one of the things I did when I started in that context, because I wanted to hear from them what was working, what was not, what did they envision, what did they dream. And then COVID actually did give us an opportunity to begin to try some new things, but it was so much harder. Like, when I say try new things, it was like, hey, we know relationships matter. Let's go have food after a Sunday night service. Right. And it was so outside of the box, one, because the model had been the same for the last decade plus, one, and then two, the amount of hoops you have to jump through just to do something like that with students in a large church setting is significant. So I really do believe that smaller contexts have an advantage. I hope they really take advantage of that right now.
For sure.
And then larger church leaders, it's always a worthy pursuit. As difficult as it may be, it is still a worthy pursuit to reach students where they are.
Yeah, I'm even thinking about the large church leader who is trying to affect change and has been hitting like a lot of no's or a lot of red tape, and like, just keep going, like stay encouraged. And I think even sometimes the idea of experimenting or changing something that has seemed pretty fixed over time, sometimes it can seem like our experiments have to be grand and huge, but sometimes you just kind of chip away at it with smaller things. But I just feel for the person who is, and even the person who is the no person on accident, because they have to think about liability of how many kids are you putting in one car to go, and how are they going to get home, and who's riding home. Like, I get it. Like, it is a complex thing sometimes, but man, we got to stay encouraged and really think, like, how do we serve our time? How do we serve our generation?
Well, you see fruit from it too. When you do it, like, it is so worth it if you're leading in that context, whether it's just going to grab food, in an organized way. I mean, that was step one of a much grander like idea for changing programming, or maybe doing something different on a Sunday, or not meeting on a Sunday and doing that instead. And some of our campuses were actually able to do some of that. We were able to do some at ours. So it's always worth it. You got to keep going, but it may not be that 1,000-mile vision that you have. You may just need to start with mile 1.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I'm going to throw a curveball at Katlyn.
Okay.
Because I heard that you coach lacrosse. Is this correct?
I run the program at Kings Ridge.
Wow. Okay.
So.
I want to know, because a thing that's been coming up a lot in our conversation is, how do we keep relationships front and center? How do we connect and make sure that our programming and our models and the things that we're trying really are inviting people together to do something together that will help them follow Jesus more? I want to know, how does coaching, or even just being involved with students who are playing a sport, how does that inform how you think of relationships, and what can the church maybe even learn from some of that?
Yeah, I love the fact that I get to do both of these jobs, because they do intertwine so much, and I've learned like so much crossover. So I think for me, it's just like, it is truly about meeting students where they're at.
Yeah.
And in lacrosse, I get to experience it on a daily basis, since they're like daily practices. So it's showing up, and like, you could have one girl come out in the field and be like super pumped, ready to go, and the next one walks out and has had a awful day, failed a test, didn't get along with the teacher, whatever. And so it's being able to minister to them individually in a very condensed amount of time. So it is like truly investing in them and showing them like, hey, I care about you as a person. Like, whether it's they think that they're a number in student ministry, or they think they like had to just earn a spot on a team, like, it's proving to them that, no, I care about you as a person, not about you because you like come and do something for me by bringing your friends to church, or you do something for me by like being the star in the field. So
that's good. That's so good. I mean, even speaking of lacrosse, I'm thinking throwback to, was this 90s ministry, 2000s ministry, where it seemed like there were a lot of like skateboard ministry things happening? Wasn't that an era, right, that happened? I am curious. I feel like that was an accepted, innovative model for back then. I'm going to throw us for another curveball. I want to know, what are some, just a one-liner of like, just what if ministries started doing X, Y, Z? And I want our listeners to kind of walk away with a lot more what ifs that they can maybe either tap into, or might spark some questions for themselves. So take a second, think about it. Let the silence be a little bit awkward, but then we're just going to rapid fire. What are some what ifs that we can start to consider as we think about our youth ministry models? Okay, what if there was a freshman tradition that every freshman group got to create themselves, that got retired once they reached kind of their senior year together? That's my what if.
My what if would be, what if youth ministries focused intently on student transitions?
Love it.
what if student ministries gave ownership to students?
What if every youth pastor believed that a student's freshman year of college was still their responsibility?
Whew. Oh boy.
Wow.
Hear me out. I love this so much, but what if we didn't have to do music every week?
Ooh.
And at the same time, what if we didn't have to do a sermon every week?
Ooh.
And at the same time, like, what a small group could look to. I guess my point is, what if we weren't married to a specific service format?
What if for really busy seasons, we upped our digital strategy in a way that made sense for a kid's life and their life rhythms?
Yeah. What if we started having more family experiences for students? and not just kids.
Wait, say a little bit more on that.
Yeah, we have something here at Orange called an FX,
Yeah.
and oftentimes they're done with kids. It's like Jingle Jam. I think it was when we have Easter Jam. We got a lot of jams, summer
got lots
jams.
of
We're
jams.
jamming.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a dad joke. Anyways, I just think students need experiences with whoever the adult is in their life that is raising them, that are inspired and, for lack of a better word, programmed by the local church.
Yeah.
Like, why don't we do that for students and not just kids?
That makes sense.
I think connected to that, what if we partnered better with parents?
This is a weird one, but what if we took more pictures? I'm thinking about documenting the transformation of a kid's life where they get to see what they looked like in middle school. And you know what I mean? Like, where literally you just have photos and photos, not just because it's an event, but just because we're together. We just, let's just take more pictures. Integrate that into our models.
It's good. Church directory. Is that
Bring it back. Yeah.
what if we built a model that thrived even if we weren't there every week as the leader?
What if we built a model where kids participated with other ministries or other organizations in their community together, and it wasn't just about only our one church?
What if we made serving a bigger part of student ministry?
Yeah, that's good.
And what if we focused intently on building sustainable relationships with other youth ministers in our areas?
Yes, I love sustainable
Yes.
being. That's amazing. This is fantastic. I hope that edit wasn't awkward, because there's a lot of awkward silence between some of those. I love our producers and our production team here. Y'all are fantastic. Okay, so we're nearing the end of the conversation, but probably two more things, and you don't want to miss the last thing we're going to talk about. But I want to know, what are y'all's dream models? What are, like, if there was no red tape, infinite budget, whatever the thing is that you need to make your dream model come true? I want to hear, what would be a dream model? We'll start with you, Shane. Dream model.
Okay, so I'm going to speak like larger church, like mid-sized to larger church context, because that's just what I'm familiar with. So for me, like, what I imagined is not meeting for a large group gathering every week. So maybe once, maybe twice a month that you would get together, do some form of large group gathering where maybe you only have worship at one of those, but you like blow it out. It's just like an incredible worship experience. And then maybe the other one is more conversation driven. So we do something in our XP3 curriculum called integrated small group leader guides, integrated teaching videos, something more like that. Maybe some pause, some we're going to teach for a little bit. We're going to pause, have conversation, and just be able to extend that time. So maybe some large group gatherings that look like that. But then the other 2 or 3 weeks out of the month, we're regularly serving, ideally in the same place. So we find a partnership with something local in the community or someone local in the community. And every month we're showing up and we're like actually filling a significant need over time. And then the second one, it is literally just chilling. We go to Waffle House. We check out, McDonald's. We definitely pack Taco Bell. That's where I'll be hanging out. And literally groups just hang together. I still think that we would have provided something to guide that time, like some reflection or guided prayer, guided conversation. But like, that's just who students are. And I'd love for us to meet them in that way while still in that larger church context setting, while still getting done what everybody's going to want to get done, which is some type of large group gathering.
Yeah. I love
something
that.
like that.
That's a dream. That is a dream. Any other dream models, things you'd love to see?
Caitlin's living my dream. So.
I was going to say, I don't know that like I have like a set dream model, but we are like, my church right now is implementing basically what Shane's talking about, where 2 Sundays a month we have large group gathering, and there's worship, and there's somebody preaching, and there's small group time, and it's like your typical like large Sunday night gathering. And then the other 2 Sundays a month, we're still meeting at the church, but we're hosting a Bible study. And so we're allowing students to come in and just dive into the Word, and we're working through books of the Bible, and we're super excited about it. This is something like super new that we're implementing now. But I love the idea of adding in like one Sunday as a service. And something really cool we did over the summer was we did after parties with our student ministry, where like every Sunday after we met, we would go to Dairy Queen or Waffle House or whatever like one of the local chains was in our area. We'd have them go, and I'd say 9 times out of 10, every single student who attended Sunday went to an after party.
I love
That's
that.
so good.
So
That's amazing.
We'd have more. Have you ever had more show up at that?
Yes.
When they did that after hours thing that I was talking about, like sometimes students will just show up.
Oh yeah.
Which is so cool. I love that, Katlyn. That's awesome. Just living the dream. Living my dream. Oh my gosh. Sorry.
No,
That's
you
amazing.
still work here. Don't leave. don't take shame.
No.
Jarin, do you have any like dream models?
Yeah, mine's going to sound a little conceptual, and then I'll try and ground it practically. But conceptually, I've just been so bothered. It's like stuck like a lens by which I see youth ministry at the moment. But it's like the ancient church had 3 models of transformation: orthodoxy, orthopraxy, and the lost one is orthopathy. So right doctrine, right belief, right activity in a community of followers of Jesus, but also right affections. And this one, I think youth ministries do so well without even realizing.
Wait, which one they do so well?
The orthopathy piece.
Gotcha.
Where we're stirring their affections, where we're kind of giving them that camp experience, for example. I realized like I absolutely needed that as a teenager for my affections to be stirred, to literally give myself room to fall in love with Jesus through an encounter over time with him, right? So some kind of model that would hold all 3, where it's not like we're not doing camp anymore, we're not gathering anymore, anything, but like something that can hold the formation of someone's theological understanding of who they are, of God's story, right? So this is where some kind of regular Bible study, like what Katlyn's doing, and just thinking through that. What does it look like for a student to be theologically formed? How can they walk like Jesus? Just do the stuff he did. So I very much agree with a very, very low-hanging area would be serving a practical need in your city. I've watched my students do this in the past 4 years and some change that we have relationship. And that is the best part of my job, hands down. Watching them become friends with the city, and realize that God's presence shows up literally in dangerous or unlovely places. It's just been the joy of my life the past number of years. And then the third thing, orthopathy. So that's why, I don't want to be I guess I am playing a little bit of the contrarian, but I think worship and spirit response ministry, or giving room for students to contemplatively or charismatically, or just simply leave room for them to encounter the presence of God, something within your model that has regular room for that, whether that's, depending on your tradition, your church tradition, just somewhere where it's like, it's you and the Father, Son, and Spirit, and you're given an opportunity to have that, whether in a small group setting, whether in a worship gathering, whether in a prayer group meeting, whether, whatever it is, but just having those 3 things be a lens for me. That's something that's really raw. And then I've talked to Shane about this, but some kind of model that can always leave room, or at least have some kind of space for the 5 questions to be asked. And this is Carapal's thing. Do you know my name? And I got it right here. Do you know what matters to me? Do you know where I live? Do you know what I've done, good and bad? And then do you know what I can do?
Yeah.
I believe in you. Those things, those 5 questions, in my opinion, I've just been like, okay, how can we not like force that, but how can our models make that really easy for that to happen for each student? I don't know. I'm dreaming with you guys, but those 5 things, I have a number of faces that Jesus sent into my life that I can look back on, and even to this day, and in relationship with, that stewards my faith in him. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That was all concept. I'm sorry.
No, that's
that's
amazing.
good.
That's amazing.
I think what Jarin is talking about is maybe, and I want to be careful not to be prescriptive here, because I don't know everybody's context, but as I laid out my dream model, that dream model only works if it's under the umbrella that Jarin just communicated to us. I think that is the biggest shift. So when we talk practical model, like when we meet and do that kind of thing, that's one thing. Anything I would do in any programming setting, whether it was a Taco Bell, a church building, or at a service project, I would want to be rooted 100%. In everything Jarin just said. I would want to be rooted in, this is helping students on their spiritual formation journey. It is helping them to become more like Jesus, and ultimately it is giving them opportunity to practice the way of Jesus, because that doesn't just happen in a church building. And that may be the first thing we have to address when it comes to imagining a new model, is that it doesn't just happen in one setting. There are many settings, and we should feel the freedom and excited about the fact that we can experiment with that.
Totally. We love that. As we keep talking about how relationships are important in everything we do, even the 5 questions that Jarin leaned into, we love that topic so much. We actually have a book that dives deeper. If you want to know more about those 5 questions, you can check out It's Personal. It's a story of really Jesus's relationship with Zacchaeus and how that teaches us how to see kids and students just so much more fully for who they are. So yeah.
That's so good.
All right. Last question.
Hold on.
What?
I'm sorry.
No, what?
All of our listeners are wondering what your dream model is, Leslie. We have to hear it.
My dream model is a combination of all y'all's. Literally, I was like, check, I would do that. Check, I would love to be a part of that. And check, love to be a part of that.
Okay.
No, seriously.
You're brilliant. I'm just thinking yeah.
So, okay, here we go. I'm going to, well, it's not a Jesus juke. I think my dream model is that there are a menu of models that churches are constantly getting to shop from.
That's great.
So they just got 3 more to add to their menu. And so my dream model is that the church as a whole would say like, cool, I'm in a season where I can experiment. I'm going to try, the one that Katlyn kind of invited us into, or I'm going to try the one that Jarin talked about, or the one that Shane talked about, so that I really think we can't get locked into one way. I think Jesus invited us to keep gathering, and that there's something special and incredible that happens when people and followers get together. So I think as long as we're getting together, and working through the ups and downs, working through the fun celebrations and working through the hard stuff of life, I think that's what's most important to me. And I think that happens best and most broadly and colorfully and texturedly when we're doing more life together, not just church, not just church, which I love church. So don't hear me say that in a negative way. So yeah, that's my dream model, is multiple menus of models. So cool. Yeah. Okay. Last question that we're going to lean into real quick. I want us to just go ahead and name, when we talk about change, or when we talk about innovation, or when we talk about thinking outside of the box, I think there's a space for everything to change, but maybe there's some things that we should hold on to, right? Even if the method changes, the why or the values or the principles maybe don't change, whatever, however we want to define that. But what are some of the things that shouldn't change? What are some of the things that should stay core to why we do what we do?
I'll start. So I had the opportunity to drive a very, very famous evangelist / former youth minister of 25 years, I think she was. And I have my little old 2004 Honda Civic at the time that made noise. So I was really nervous.
Awesome.
Here's why I'm telling the story. I'm telling the story because I picked her up and I knew she had this deep background in 25 years of youth ministry. And I'm driving with her and she's like, be careful, don't turn this. And I had the chance to ask her, what would you do if you were a youth minister again today? And she looked at me very candidly and she said, in my 25 to 30 years of doing youth ministry and of going around the world and still being near and around teenagers, my answer has never changed. Personal encounter or they won't make it. That's just something that has not changed. Leaving room for students to encounter the God and fall in love with Jesus, literally to fall in love with Jesus. I know this sounds maybe romantic and fluffy, but I just know that will never change how I create room for them to personally encounter the person of Jesus, and then how they felt as leaders walk alongside them in the way of Jesus, in particular because their emotional formation, I think, is so important and so loud. If that can be stewarded in the direction of Jesus, may it be so. So personal encounter, obviously for me, that one's just really, really stuck with me.
I think something like small groups, giving them a place where they know they always have an adult who cares about them. Doesn't have to look like the typical small group, but just supplying students with a leader who cares.
I love that.
Gosh, that's so good. It's a personal encounter with the person of Jesus. That statement's going to resonate. The importance of having a person who's investing in them, relational discipleship. I think I would say we always have to create a safe place for them to talk about anything and to be who they truly are. And I know that's an orange thing that we say, but I'm saying that as someone who's a practitioner for years and years and saw that the most powerful ministry happened when a student felt safe to show up as they truly are, to share who they really were. And I always felt like the more a student felt safe in any environment we created or with any person that we put in their lives, the more effective our ministry was. I just think that's something that can never change no matter what model we're creating.
I think for me, the thing I'd say is a non-negotiable would be there has to be room for questions.
Yeah, so good.
We can't either program so much or even teach so much that we edge out all the space and there's no room to ask questions. There's no room to disagree. There's no room to doubt. There's no room to go on a journey so that on the other side of the question, or even if it's a lifelong question, that truly there's a formation that's happening just because you're on the journey. And so I think no matter what we do, we can't over program out the idea of space for kids and teenagers to ask questions.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I want to say for our partners who are listening, who are like, y'all didn't mention the Bible or Jesus, all those things, we agree that all those things should never disappear from the model. So I just want to name that.
I don't think you're a church if you don't talk about Jesus.
There
right?
we go. Yeah. I just want to say stating the obvious. Yes, we already agree. Those things are definitely a non-negotiable to not eliminate from the model. Yeah, fantastic. Good. Y'all, this has been an incredible conversation. Any final thoughts before we wrap?
Y'all are really smart. If you don't know Katlyn Tyler and Jarin Oda, you need to know them.
Absolutely. 100%.
That's all I would say.
100%. I can't wait to re-listen to this episode. I feel like I learned so much, just even the way we're processing and the kinds of questions we're asking. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Rethinking Youth Ministry Podcast. We'd love to continue having this conversation with you. So we want to know if you are rethinking any models in your youth ministry. Let us know. DM us at Orange Students. Thanks for dropping in. Check out the show notes and have a fantastic week.